It was supposed to be a new chapter, a fresh start after years of marriage, after years of building a life together. I had given everything to my marriage, thinking that the love and trust we had built would withstand anything. But in an instant, everything came crashing down around me. It was a late evening, the kind where the world feels quiet and still, and I was sitting in the living room, scrolling through my phone, trying to wind down after a long day. I had no idea that the next few minutes would change my life forever. The text message came in like a punch to the gut. "Are you sure you want to keep going with this?" The message read, from a number I didn't recognize. Confused, I clicked on the message. The conversation thread was long, and I couldn't understand how or why someone would be sending me this kind of message. But as I read through the thread, the reality began to sink in. It was a conversation between my wife, Emily, and another man. The words were there in black and white, undeniable. They had been having an affair. The last few months of our marriage, all the fights, the distance, it was all a lie. She had already made up her mind. I remember feeling like the floor had just been ripped from underneath me. My heart pounded and my mind raced. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The one person I had trusted above all else had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I wasn't just hurt. I was humiliated. Every moment, every memory, felt tainted. I had to confront her. I had to know the truth. My hands shook as I called Emily. She answered after the first ring, her voice too calm, too collected. "Hey babe, what's up?" she asked as though nothing was wrong. "Emily," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We need to talk." I could feel the tension building on the other end of the line, the weight of everything I had just discovered hanging in the air. "I know," she said, her voice softening. "I didn't want you to find out this way." "How long?" I asked, struggling to get the words out. "How long has this been going on?" There was a long pause, one that felt like it stretched on forever. "Months," she replied, her voice shaking now. "It started a few months ago. I never meant to hurt you, but I just couldn't stay anymore." The world around me went silent. I felt a knot form in my stomach, a mix of rage and disbelief. "You've been lying to me for months, Emily. I've been fighting for us, trying to make things work. And you've been with him. Behind my back," I said, each word like a knife in my chest. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I never meant for things to get this far. But I didn't know how to tell you." I sat there in stunned silence, listening to the woman I had given my heart to, admitting to something I never thought I would hear. The person I thought I knew, the person I had spent years building a life with, had broken me in a way I couldn't even comprehend. "You don't get to do this to me, Emily," I said, my voice breaking. "You don't get to destroy everything we built without facing the consequences." I ended the call, feeling like a shell of myself. I knew deep down this was the beginning of the end. My marriage had been destroyed, but something else was awakening inside me. A need for justice. I wasn't just going to let this betrayal go unanswered. I was going to fight back, and I was going to make sure she faced the consequences of her actions. But I had no idea just how much this betrayal would change the course of my life. The next few days felt like they passed in a blur. My world had been turned upside down, and I couldn't stop replaying Emily's words in my head. I just couldn't stay anymore. The more I thought about it, the more it didn't make sense. How could someone I loved, someone I had built my life with, throw it all away so easily? But it wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about the injustice of it all. The lies, the deception, the way she had treated me as if I was expendable. I couldn't just let it go. I couldn't walk away from this without making sure she faced the consequences. I remember sitting in my office, staring at my phone, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I had already lost so much, but this was different. I wasn't going to lose myself. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I called a lawyer. I wasn't sure where to start, but I knew I needed help. I couldn't fight this battle alone. When I met with my lawyer, Paul, I explained everything. The affair, the sale of our house, the complete lack of respect for our marriage. Paul listened quietly, taking notes as I spoke. I could see the concern in his eyes, But there was also a glimmer of something else, understanding. He had dealt with cases like mine before, and he knew what I was up against. "Dylan," Paul said after a long pause, "this is going to be tough, but you're in the right. She's not just guilty of betrayal. She's made some serious legal missteps. Selling the house without your consent is illegal. If you want, we can move forward with litigation to reverse the sale and potentially claim damages. But I'll be honest with you, it's going to take time. It's not going to be easy." I didn't hesitate. "Do it. I'm ready." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of meetings, paperwork, and sleepless nights. It wasn't just the legal process that weighed on me. It was the emotional toll. Every time I sat in front of a lawyer or a detective, I was reminded of the pain Emily had caused, of the trust one had placed in her, only to have it shattered so completely. But as much as it hurt, something inside me had shifted. The pain was still there, raw and fresh, but it wasn't controlling me anymore. I was the one in control now. This wasn't just about a divorce. This wasn't just about a house. This was about justice. This was about standing up for myself, standing up for the person I used to be, and reclaiming what I had lost. It wasn't long before the next bombshell dropped. One evening, I got a call from Paul. The words he said next sent a chill through me. "Dylan, we've found more. We've uncovered evidence that Emily had been siphoning off money from your joint account for months. It's more than just the house. There's a trail of financial misconduct that goes back years. This is much bigger than we initially thought." I sat there, stunned, as Paul explained the details. Emily hadn't just been having an affair. She had been systematically draining our savings, using our joint funds to finance her relationship with the other man. She had been hiding it from me, lying to me, betraying me at every turn. Couldn't believe it. My mind raced, but I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel defeated. I felt something else, something stronger. I felt a sense of clarity. This wasn't just about getting back at Emily anymore. This was about exposing the truth. The next step was clear. I needed to bring this information to light. I couldn't let Emily get away with this. But as I stood on the edge of what would be a very public battle, I had to ask myself, was I ready for what was coming? Was I prepared to fight to the bitter end, to expose the lies, to take back my life? I knew the answer even before I spoke it aloud. "Yes," I said quietly to myself. "I'm ready." The days following our discovery were a blur of legal meetings, phone calls, and late-night research. But amidst all the noise, one thing became crystal clear. I was no longer a victim. I wasn't just sitting back and letting this happen to me. I was fighting back, and the truth was on my side. Emily had no idea how deep this was going to go. She thought she could sell the house, lie to me, and cover it all up without any consequences. But she had underestimated me, and now the full extent of her actions was starting to unravel. Paul and I worked tirelessly, digging through Emily's financial records, following the trail of deceit she had carefully crafted. We found more than just evidence of her affair. We found that for months, she had been draining our accounts, using our hard-earned savings to fund her relationship. It was sickening. Each discovery was like another punch to the gut. But the more we uncovered, the more determined I became to expose the truth. The next major step in the case was to gather all the evidence we could and prepare for the court hearing. Emily wasn't going to be able to talk her way out of this one. The documents we had compiled, the financial discrepancies, the trail of lies, they were undeniable. But there was still one piece of the puzzle I hadn't expected to find. A few days before the court hearing, Paul called me with some unexpected news. He had uncovered a new witness. Someone who had been aware of Emily's actions and had been keeping track of her movements for months. This person had seen her transferring money, heard her discussing her plans, and even witnessed some of the more unsavory aspects of her betrayal. "Do you want to know who it is?" Paul asked, his voice full of intrigue. "Who?" I replied, my curiosity piqued. "It's one of Emily's closest friends." "Sarah," Paul said, his voice heavy with the weight of the revelation. "She's been keeping a secret from Emily. She's been documenting everything and she's willing to testify." I was stunned. Sarah had always been a part of our social circle, someone I had trusted. But the fact that she knew everything and had kept quiet? It hit me hard. However, it was also the break we needed. With her testimony, we could not only expose the financial fraud but also prove that Emily's actions had been premeditated. It wasn't just a mistake, it was part of a pattern. I met with Sarah the next day. She looked nervous, her hands shaking as she sat down across from me in the quiet cafe. I knew this wasn't going to be easy for her, but I also knew it was the only way to end this once and for all. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why wait until now?" She looked down at her coffee cup, her eyes filled with regret. "I didn't know how to tell you, Dylan. I didn't want to betray her, but when I saw what she was doing, I knew it wasn't right. I never wanted you to get hurt." Her words felt like a bittersweet relief. She had known all along, and yet she had done nothing. But in that moment, I realized that this was my chance to take the upper hand. With Sarah's testimony, we could bring everything to light. Emily's betrayal wasn't just a personal failure, it was a deliberate attempt to destroy my life. And now I had the chance to make sure she paid for it. The day of the court hearing arrived, and I could feel the tension in the air as I walked into the courtroom. The room was filled with lawyers, documents, and the quiet buzz of anticipation. But all I could focus on was Emily sitting across the room, her face pale, her eyes avoiding mine. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected me to fight back so fiercely. As the hearing began, Paul and I presented the evidence, the financial records, the documents, the timeline of her actions. But it wasn't until Sarah took the stand that things truly started to unravel. She told her story in a calm, steady voice, recounting everything she had witnessed, the money transfers, the lies, the way Emily had manipulated me. She spoke of the betrayal she had seen, the guilt she had carried for not speaking up sooner. As she finished her testimony, I could see the weight of the situation pressing down on Emily. She shifted in her seat, looking like she was about to break. But there was no escaping this. The truth was out now, and there was nothing she could do to deny it. The judge listened carefully, taking in all the evidence, and when he spoke, it felt like the final nail in the coffin. "Based on the evidence presented and the testimony of the witness, I am ruling in favor of Mr. Cooper," the judge said, his voice firm. "The sale of the property was unlawful and the actions taken by the defendant are inexcusable. You will be held accountable for your actions and restitution will be required." I felt a surge of relief flood through me, but it wasn't just about winning the case. It was about the justice I had fought for, the truth that had finally come to light. Emily was going to face the consequences of her betrayal, and I was going to get my life back. The court ruling had brought me a sense of closure, but it didn't erase the pain of everything that had happened. Winning the case didn't magically fix the scars Emily had left on my heart, nor did it make me forget the years I had invested in a relationship that turned out to be a lie. I had been betrayed, not just by a woman I loved, but by someone I thought I would spend the rest of my life with. But now I had to move forward. I had to heal, and that was going to take time. The weeks after the trial were filled with a mix of emotions. I felt relief, yes, but I also felt the weight of the journey ahead. There was no going back to who I had been before. I couldn't simply pick up the pieces of my past and pretend that everything was fine. I had to rebuild myself, and that process was a lot harder than I had imagined. I spent my days focusing on work, trying to drown out the thoughts that kept creeping into my mind. My business was thriving, and I had managed to establish new relationships with clients, but the truth was I wasn't just rebuilding my professional life, I was rebuilding my personal one, too. And that meant facing the hardest part of all, forgiving myself. I had blamed myself for so much. I had asked myself time and time again, how could I not see this coming? The affair, the lies, the deceit, it all happened while I was away, fighting for our future, and I hadn't noticed the cracks in our relationship. How could I have been so blind? But with each passing day, I started to realize that it wasn't my fault. I wasn't the one who had betrayed her trust. I wasn't the one who had lied and manipulated our lives. I had done everything I could, and it still hadn't been enough. That wasn't on me. One evening, I sat down with Olivia at the kitchen table, a quiet sense of gratitude filling me. I hadn't realized how much she had helped me heal until that moment. Her unwavering support had been the rock I needed to rebuild my foundation, but it wasn't just her support that had helped me. It was her belief in me when I didn't believe in myself. "How do you do it?" I asked her, my voice soft, almost hesitant. "How do you stay so strong even when things get tough?" Olivia smiled gently, her eyes filled with understanding. "Because I believe in you. I believe in who you are. And I believe that no matter what happened in the past, you're stronger because of it." Her words hit me like a wave, washing away the final remnants of doubt I had been holding on to. I had spent so long focusing on the pain of betrayal that I had forgotten to recognize the strength I had gained from it. Yes, it had hurt. Yes, it had shattered me in ways I couldn't have imagined. But it also taught me something valuable: resilience. Olivia and I had talked about the future more often lately, about what we wanted to build together. I had spent so long mired in the past that I had forgotten that I still had a future. We both did. And as we sat together, talking about the possibilities, I began to feel a spark of excitement, the first real excitement I'd felt in months. We talked about taking a trip together, maybe somewhere we had always wanted to go, a place where we could start fresh, where the weight of the past didn't hang over us. But more than that, we talked about our lives ahead, about our goals, our dreams, and how we could support each other in achieving them. It wasn't just about moving forward from the betrayal, it was about thriving. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could. As the weeks passed, I began to focus more on my personal growth. I enrolled in courses, started exercising more, and began to take care of my mental health. I joined a local support group for people who had experienced betrayal in relationships. It was a difficult step, but it was the first step in truly healing. Talking about my pain, sharing my story, helped me let go of the bitterness that had been holding me back. Slowly, I began to feel like myself again. Not the man I was before the betrayal, but a new version of myself, one that was stronger, more self-aware, and more determined than ever to live a life that was true to who I was. One afternoon, as I stood in the yard, staring at the garden I had planted in the months after the divorce, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The flowers I had nurtured were blooming beautifully, a perfect metaphor for my life. It had been hard, painful even, but I was finally starting to bloom again. I was no longer just surviving. I was living. And as I looked around at everything I had worked to rebuild, I realized that the future was no longer a question. It was a certainty. I had survived the ultimate betrayal, and I had emerged stronger. The hardest part was over. The journey was far from easy, but I had learned the most important lesson of all, that no matter what happens, I had the power to shape my life. And I wasn't going to let anyone or anything take that away from me. The next few months felt like a fresh start. I had spent so long feeling broken, feeling as though everything I had worked for had crumbled to dust. But now I realized that the only thing that could truly break me was if I chose to let it. And I wasn't going to let the past control my future. Olivia and I had begun building something new together. Slowly, we'd started to weave our own story. One that was based on trust, mutual respect, and shared dreams. It wasn't easy, of course. No journey ever is. But it was a journey I wanted to take. Together. One of the first things I did, after everything had settled, was take a week off to myself. I needed space. Space to think, to breathe, and to finally shed the remnants of the life I had shared with Emily. It wasn't about escaping. It was about letting go. I took a trip to the mountains. There was something about the quiet and the solitude that calmed my mind. I had spent years in the chaos of everyday life, of fighting battles I didn't always understand. But now, in the stillness of nature, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just about moving forward. It was about embracing the present. On the last day of my trip, I sat at the top of a hill, overlooking a vast valley, the sun setting behind the distant mountains. I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't known in years. The air was cool. The sky was vibrant with oranges and purples, and for the first time, I didn't feel the weight of my past hanging over me. I was free. When I returned home, everything seemed to be in its place. Olivia greeted me with a warm hug and a smile, and we spent the evening talking about our future. But this time, it felt different. It felt like we were no longer simply surviving the present. We were building something that was going to last. Something real, something worthy of the trust we were putting into it. But even with everything starting to settle, I knew the true test had yet to come. I had learned the hard way that life doesn't stop throwing challenges your way. The question was, how would I respond to them? As time passed, my relationship with Olivia continued to grow. We took small trips together, built memories, and supported each other as we faced the day-to-day challenges of life. There was no rushing it, no need to force anything. We were building something steady, and it felt good. But more than that, I was learning to trust again. Not just her, but myself. I had spent so much time feeling weak, wondering if I could ever recover. But now, I realized that the strength I needed was already inside me. It had been all along. It wasn't just about me and Olivia anymore. It was about the life we could create together. We talked about getting a dog, starting a new project together, and even exploring the idea of buying a new place. One that wasn't just a home, but a symbol of how far we had come. And through it all, I thought back to that moment when I had been sitting in my office, reading that devastating text from Emily. I remembered the anger, the shock, and the overwhelming feeling of being betrayed. But now I was no longer defined by that moment. I had moved past it. I had fought for my life back. I had fought for my peace of mind. And I had won. The past no longer had a hold on me. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. As the months went by, life slowly settled into a rhythm. I was no longer the man consumed by anger, regret, and betrayal. I had found a new sense of purpose. The battles I had fought, the ones I thought would break me, had only made me stronger. I had built a life from the ashes of my past. And now I was moving forward. The work I had poured myself into was flourishing, and the business was starting to take off. Olivia and I were doing well, our connection growing deeper with each passing day. The future was brighter than it had been in a long time, and for the first time, I felt like I could breathe again. But just when I thought the dust had settled, a shadow from my past emerged, ready to test everything I had rebuilt. One afternoon, I received a letter. The envelope was plain, but the weight of it felt ominous. I hesitated before opening it. As I tore through the seal, I immediately recognized the handwriting. It was from Emily, the woman who had once been my everything, only to betray me in the most heart-wrenching way. I stood there, staring at the letter in my hands, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to throw it away, to pretend it didn't exist, but the other part, the part that had been hurt and scarred by everything that happened, couldn't let it go. I had to know what she wanted. I sat down, took a deep breath, and began to read. "Dylan," it started. "I know this letter is the last thing you want to receive from me, but I need you to understand something. I made a mistake. I know I destroyed your trust, and I've lived with that guilt every single day since. But I need you to know that I never meant to hurt you. I thought I was doing the right thing for myself, but I see now how wrong I was. The man I was with, it was never about love. It was about escape. And when you left, I felt like my world had ended. But now I see the truth. I see what I lost, and I need to make things right." I read the letter again, slowly this time, processing every word. Emily's words stung, but they also carried something unexpected. Regret. Real, raw regret. It was the first time in a long while that I had seen any acknowledgement of the damage she had done. But even as I read her apology, I knew that forgiveness was not something I could just give away. She had hurt me in ways I couldn't even begin to describe. The wounds she had inflicted were still fresh, still deep within me. I couldn't just let that go. Olivia, seeing the letter in my hand, came over to sit beside me. "What does it say?" she asked quietly, her voice full of concern. I handed her the letter, watching her as she read through it. When she finished, she turned to me, her expression thoughtful. "What do you want to do, Dylan?" I didn't have to think long. "I want to let go of the past, but I also need to protect myself. I can't just forget everything she did. This letter, it doesn't change what happened. It doesn't change the damage." Olivia nodded, her eyes understanding. "You've come so far, Dylan. Whatever you decide, I'll support you." I stared out the window, the weight of it all hanging in the air. Emily's apology was a step in the right direction, but it wasn't enough. I had moved on. I had found my peace, and I wasn't going to let her past actions control my future. I took a deep breath, folded the letter, and placed it in a drawer. "I'm done with that chapter," I said firmly. "I've learned the hard way that forgiveness isn't something that happens on someone else's timeline. It's something I have to do when I'm ready. But right now, I'm not ready. I've worked too hard to rebuild my life to let her pull me back into her mess." Olivia reached over and squeezed my hand. "And you don't have to. You've earned your peace, Dylan. Don't let anyone take that from you." And in that moment, I realized just how far I had come. The road hadn't been easy, but it had shaped me into someone stronger, more resilient. Emily's actions had broken me, but they had also built me into a man who was unbreakable. The months that followed the letter from Emily were filled with a new sense of purpose. The betrayal had nearly shattered me, but in a strange way, it had also freed me. freed me from the lies, from the weight of the past that had kept me chained. Freed me to live again, not just for survival, but for the joy of living. Olivia and I had taken a step toward something more. Our relationship had grown stronger, not just from the love we shared, but from the understanding we built together. We had started dreaming, talking about a future that wasn't tainted by the scars of my past. We began planning trips, taking time off from work, and even discussing the possibility of expanding our family. For the first time, I felt like my future was in my hands again. I wasn't defined by my past mistakes or the pain I'd been through. But even as everything started to fall into place, I knew that there was still one more thing I had to do. A final piece of the puzzle I couldn't ignore. I had spent so much time looking ahead, but I needed to look back one last time and make peace with the person who had betrayed me. Emily. I hadn't seen her since the court ruling, and honestly, I hadn't wanted to. The anger was gone, but the hurt still lingered like a shadow that I couldn't shake. I knew deep down that I needed closure. It wasn't about forgiving her. It was about finally understanding what happened and letting go of whatever was left of her in my life. One evening, as I sat with Olivia, I made the decision. I think I need to see her, I said, my voice steady but unsure. Not for her, but for me. I can't keep running from this. I need closure. Olivia didn't hesitate. I'll be here for you, whatever you decide. The next day, I found myself standing outside the small cafe where I had once met Emily for dates, for coffee, for those moments we shared before everything fell apart. Felt surreal walking into that place again. But I wasn't walking in as the man who had been betrayed. I was walking in as a man who had taken back control of his life, who had fought through the storm and come out stronger. When Emily saw me, her face paled. She looked different, like the weight of everything had caught up with her. She stood up, her eyes searching mine for any sign of anger or regret. But I was past that. There was nothing left for me to feel. Dylan, she said softly, I didn't think you'd want to see me again. I sat down across from her, the weight of the moment heavy but not unbearable. I needed to see you, Emily. Not for you, but for me. She looked confused, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. I know what I did to you. I'll never be able to undo it. But I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I nodded, letting her words sink in. But I wasn't here for an apology. I wasn't here for excuses. I don't need you to fix what's broken. I just need you to understand that I've moved on. I found peace, even without you. And I'm okay. Her eyes welled up, and I could see the tears in her eyes. I never meant for it to end like this, Dylan. I thought I was doing what was best for me, but I see now how much I lost. I could have stayed angry. I could have let the bitterness I felt for her continue to build, but I knew that wasn't the way forward. Not for me. It's not about what you lost anymore, Emily. It's about what I gained. I've rebuilt my life, and I'm proud of what I've done. I'm proud of who I've become. For a long moment, we just sat there, both of us quiet, both of us finally understanding the magnitude of what had happened. There was no more anger, no more rage, just a quiet understanding that the past was something we both had to leave behind. I'm glad you found peace, Emily said softly, looking down at her hands. I wish you nothing but the best, Dylan. I stood up, taking one last look at her. Goodbye, Emily. I hope you find what you're looking for too. And with that, I walked out of the cafe, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in a long time, I felt completely free. Back at home, Olivia was waiting for me. She didn't ask about the details, didn't question what had happened. She just looked at me with a soft smile, knowing that I had done what I needed to do. I'm proud of you, Dylan, she said, wrapping her arms around me. You've come so far. I held her close, feeling the warmth of her love surround me. For the first time in years, I felt like I was truly home. The future wasn't just a distant hope anymore. It was a reality. I had faced the hardest moments of my life, and now I was finally ready to live again. To truly live. It had been a few months since I finally let go of the past. I had faced my demons, closed that chapter of my life, and now I was living in the present with Olivia by my side. My business was thriving, My relationships with friends and family were stronger than ever, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly in control. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Despite the success, despite the healing, there was still an itch deep inside me. An unanswered question that I had been too afraid to ask. Was this it? Was this the life I had fought for? I thought back to my time in the military. The long deployments, the sacrifice, the relentless pursuit of a goal. It had always been about fighting for something bigger than myself. When I left the army, I thought I would find purpose in my marriage. But it was clear now that I had been fighting for a lie. And now I was fighting for something real. For my future. For the family I had started to build with Olivia. But was that enough? I sat alone in my office one evening, looking out at the city skyline. The lights shimmered below me, and I couldn't help but think about what lay ahead. I had built everything from the ground up, but was it enough to fill the hole I had been carrying with me for so long? Olivia had been more than just a partner. She had been a healer, someone who had helped me pick up the pieces when I thought I couldn't go on. But I wasn't sure if it was fair to her for me to continue living in the shadow of my past, holding on to pieces of a life that no longer existed. That night, I made a decision. It was time to take the next step, not just in my relationship with Olivia, but in my own life. I was going to do something that scared me, something I had avoided for too long. I was going to confront my deepest fear, facing the uncertainty of the future and allowing myself to dream again. I called Olivia the next morning and asked her to meet me at the park. I had something important I needed to say. When I saw her, I couldn't help but smile. She was everything I needed, everything I never thought I could have. But there was still that lingering doubt in my chest, that nagging feeling that told me I wasn't ready. Ready for what? I didn't know. But I knew I couldn't keep going on like this, pretending to have everything figured out. I've been thinking. I began, my voice hesitant but determined. I want to take the next step. I want us to build something more than just a life together. I want to build a legacy. Olivia looked at me, her eyes filled with curiosity. What do you mean? I've spent so much time recovering, so much time just getting by, I said. But I don't want to just get by anymore. I want to give back. I want to make a difference, not just in our lives, but in the lives of others. I want to build something bigger, something that will last long after we're gone. Her smile widened, and she reached for my hand. I'm with you, she said, her voice full of warmth and sincerity. Whatever you want to do, I'm here. And just like that, everything clicked into place. I had been afraid of what the future held, afraid of taking the leap into the unknown. But with Olivia by my side, I knew I wasn't alone. We weren't just building a life together. We were building a legacy, something that could impact the world beyond ourselves. We talked for hours that day, about our dreams, our hopes, and our vision for the future. It wasn't about grand gestures or flashy accomplishments. It was about making a real difference, starting with our own community and spreading from there. That evening, I took Olivia to dinner, and as we sat across from each other, I realized something that had been staring me in the face all along. The ultimate betrayal had been the best thing that ever happened to me. It had forced me to look inward, to confront my deepest fears, and to rebuild from the ground up. Without the pain, without the betrayal, I wouldn't have the clarity I had now. I wouldn't have the courage to take risks, to chase dreams, and to live life without fear. Here's to the future, I said, raising my glass. To the future, Olivia echoed, her eyes shining with excitement. And as we toasted, I realized that life wasn't just about surviving. It was about living, about thriving, about creating something that mattered. And with Olivia by my side, I knew that the future was full of endless possibilities. The road ahead wasn't easy, and I knew that. Nothing worth having ever came without effort. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Olivia and I threw ourselves into our new project with the same fervor and dedication that had carried us through everything else. We were creating something from scratch, something that was built on the foundation of our shared values, a desire to give back and make a difference in the lives of others. Our vision had taken shape, slowly at first, but it had become clear to both of us. We weren't just running a business. We were laying the groundwork for a community initiative that could help others who had experienced the same struggles. I had seen the darkness that betrayal could bring, and I wanted to be the light that helped guide others out of it. We started small, organizing support groups for veterans, those who had faced their own wars, whether overseas or at home. But it grew quickly. The people we helped had a sense of purpose, a place to connect and heal, and it became our mission to provide them with the resources they needed to rebuild their own lives. There were moments when the weight of it all felt overwhelming. I had worked hard to get here, to build a life for myself after everything that had happened. But now the responsibility of helping others was heavy. But every time I felt the strain, I would think back to the months of struggle, to everything I had endured, and the people who had supported me, including Olivia. Together, we were stronger than I had ever been on my own. It wasn't just about helping others. It was about showing them that life wasn't over after betrayal. It was about showing them that they, too, could rebuild just like I had. That no matter how much pain they had been through, they could still rise again. But there was another piece of the puzzle that needed to be put in place. I had to make sure that Emily's betrayal didn't take away the one thing that mattered most, my peace of mind. We had started this new chapter, but I needed to finally sever the ties that had kept me trapped in the past. I had already let go of my anger, my bitterness, but I realized there was one last thing I had to do. I had to fully forgive her. It wasn't easy. I had spent so long hating what she had done to me, blaming her for my pain. But the truth was that anger was only holding me back. It was keeping me chained to the past, and if I wanted to move forward, if I wanted to live the life I had worked so hard to create, I had to let go of the pain she had caused. I spent hours thinking about it, sitting in silence, letting the weight of my decision settle in. I couldn't erase what had happened, but I could choose to rise above it. I could choose to no longer let her actions define who I was. The moment I realized that, I felt a shift inside me. The last remnants of bitterness fell away, and I finally felt free. The next time I saw Emily, it was a brief encounter, a necessary one. I looked her in the eye and said the words I had been avoiding. "I forgive you." She stared at me, her eyes wide, as though she hadn't expected it. But there was no anger in me anymore. There was only clarity. "I'm sorry for what I did to you, Dylan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, knowing that her apology would never fix the past. But it was enough. I've let go of the past. And now it's time for both of us to move forward. That was the last time we spoke. Over the next year, things changed. Olivia and I continued to grow the initiative, reaching more people, expanding our work, and creating real, lasting change. But even more importantly, we started building the life we had dreamed of, not based on survival, but on thriving. Our community, our family, and our future were all centered around the idea that no matter what happened in the past, we could choose to rise, to rebuild, and to move forward with hope. It wasn't always easy. There were setbacks, challenges, and moments of doubt. But in those moments, I found strength not only in myself, but in the people who had supported me along the way, especially Olivia. She had always believed in me even when I couldn't believe in myself. Together, we had created something that was bigger than either of us alone. The day we moved into our new home, a place that we had dreamed about for so long, I stood at the front door and looked around. This house wasn't just a structure of brick and mortar. It was a symbol of everything I had overcome, everything I had rebuilt. It was a place where I could look ahead, free from the shadow of my past, and say with confidence, "This is where my future begins." And as I held Olivia's hand, looking out at our family, I knew that no matter what had happened before, I had finally found peace. The final chapter of my journey had begun, and it felt like everything I had worked so hard to rebuild was finally coming together. The battles, the heartbreak, the long road to justice, they had all led to this moment, and I wasn't about to let it slip away. Olivia and I stood together in the living room of our new home, looking out the large windows at the sunset. The warm hues of orange and pink painted the sky, casting a peaceful glow over everything. It felt like a dream we had both worked toward. The house wasn't just a place to live, it was a testament to the strength we had found in each other and the life we had built. But the journey wasn't over yet. Our project had taken off beyond our expectations, and we had expanded our reach. We had started something that was changing lives, something that was giving people a chance to rebuild, just like I had. We had created a foundation that was supporting veterans, families who had gone through similar struggles, and anyone who needed a helping hand to rise again. I knew we had just begun to scratch the surface of what we could accomplish, and I felt a fire in me I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just moving forward for myself anymore, I was moving forward for all those who needed to see that they could overcome their challenges too. One evening, after a long day of meetings and brainstorming with the team, I sat down with Olivia, the love of my life. She had been the anchor through all of it, the one who had kept me grounded, who had believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. "I've been thinking," I said, my voice calm but filled with purpose. "We've come so far. But I want to do more. I want to take this to the next level." Olivia looked at me with a smile, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "What do you mean?" "I want to open more centers, not just here, but across the country. We have the resources now. We have the people. And I know we can make an even bigger impact. There are so many people out there who need what we've built." She didn't hesitate for a second. "Then let's do it. Let's build something that will change lives. I'm with you every step of the way." That was it. The vision had been planted and we were going to nurture it together. We weren't just creating a business, we were creating a movement. A movement built on the idea that no matter how dark life gets, there is always light at the end of the tunnel. There's always hope. We spent the next few months working tirelessly. One afternoon, I found myself back at the same park where Olivia and I had first talked about our future. We had sat there, unsure of what was ahead, unsure if we were ready to take that leap. Now, everything had changed. I could see it in her eyes as she looked at me. We were ready. We had already taken the first steps towards something much bigger than either of us had imagined. I took her hand and led her to the same bench where we had shared that moment. "Look at how far we've come," I said softly. "We started with nothing but a dream and a desire to make a difference. And now look at us. Look at everything we've built." She smiled, her hand gently squeezing mine. "We've only just begun, Dylan. The future is ours." And in that moment, I knew she was right. This wasn't the end of the journey. It was just the beginning of something much bigger than I had ever imagined. The first of our new centers opened just a few months later. It was a humbling experience to see the smiles on the faces of those we helped, to see families reunited, veterans finding new purpose, and people walking into the building with nothing but doubt, only to walk out with hope in their hearts. It wasn't just a place of support, it was a place of transformation. As the months passed, we opened more centers, each one bringing us closer to our goal. We had built a network of support, not just for those in need, but for ourselves as well. We were living the legacy we had set out to create, and with every success, with every person we helped, it felt like the pieces of my life were finally falling into place. And through it all, Olivia and I stood side by side. The battles we had fought separately and together had shaped us into the people we were today. We weren't just surviving. We were thriving. We had taken the worst thing that had ever happened to us and turned it into something beautiful. As I looked back on everything, the divorce, the betrayal, the pain, I realized that none of it had been in vain. It had been part of my journey. It had been part of the story that had led me to this point. And in the end, it had made me who I was. Stronger, more resilient, more determined to help others find their way. The ultimate betrayal had been the catalyst for something greater. And now, with Olivia by my side, I knew that nothing could stop us from achieving everything we had set out to do. This was just the beginning. Years had passed since that dark chapter of my life, and every day I felt more grateful for the journey that had brought me here. The betrayal, the pain, the heartbreak, they had all led to this moment, this life that I had built with Olivia. The transformation I had gone through wasn't just physical, it was emotional, mental, and spiritual. I had come to understand that every obstacle, every betrayal was not just something to survive, it was something to learn from, to rise above. Olivia and I were sitting on the porch of our home, looking out over the garden we had planted together. It was a warm afternoon, the kind where time seems to stand still and everything felt peaceful. The houses in the neighborhood had come to life with the sounds of children playing, dogs barking, and families enjoying their time together. It was the kind of life I had longed for, the kind of life that had felt out of reach for so long. But I had earned this. I had fought for it. And now I was ready to live it. As we sat there, Olivia leaned her head on my shoulder. "Look at everything we've accomplished," she said softly, her voice full of contentment. "I can't believe how far we've come." I smiled, my heart full of pride and gratitude. "I know," I replied. "Sometimes it feels like a dream. But it's real. And it's ours." We had built more than just a home. We had built a life, a future, and a legacy. Our community initiative had grown beyond anything I could have imagined. We had opened several new centers, helping more and more people each day. Veterans, families, individuals who had faced betrayal or loss, they all found a place in our programs, a place to heal and rebuild. It was a reminder every day that the work we were doing was worth the effort, that we were making a difference. But as proud as I was of the work we had done, there was something deeper I had realized along the way. The greatest legacy I could leave behind wasn't the centers or the programs or even the money we had raised. The greatest legacy was the love we had built. It was the relationships we had nurtured with each other, with our children, and with everyone we had touched along the way. Olivia and I had created something beautiful together. The love we shared wasn't just a foundation, it was the driving force behind everything we did. And now I knew that we had something that would last, not just for us, but for the generations that would come after us. That night, after a long day of meetings and family time, Olivia and I went for a walk under the stars. The air was cool and the sky was clear, with thousands of tiny lights scattered across the expanse above us. "I've been thinking," I said, breaking the comfortable silence. "About the future. About the next step." She looked up at me, curious. "What do you mean?" "I think it's time we take this further," I said, my voice steady. "I want to help more people expand beyond what we've built here. We've made a real difference, but I think we can do more." She smiled, the same warmth and confidence in her eyes that had been there from the start. "You're right. There's no limit to what we can do." And in that moment, I realized that this journey, our journey, would never truly end. There would always be more people to help, more communities to impact, more lives to change. And as long as I had Olivia by my side, I knew I was ready for whatever came next. We didn't just survive the betrayal. We didn't just recover. We thrived. Together, we had created something that mattered. And we would continue to build it, brick by brick, heart by heart, for as long as we had breath in our lungs. As I sat back in my chair, the weight of everything I had been through seemed to lift. The years of pain, the tears, the sleepless nights, they had all been worth it. Because in the end, I had found my peace. I had found my purpose. And more importantly, I had found the love of my life, someone who made me want to be a better man every single day. The ultimate betrayal had led to the ultimate redemption. I had walked through the fire, and now I was standing in the light. Stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever life had in store. And this was just the beginning. What do you think about Dylan's journey of betrayal, justice, and rebuilding his life? Have you ever been through something similar? How did you find the strength to rise above it? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you found inspiration in Dylan's story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on more empowering stories like this. Remember, no matter what life throws at you, you have the strength to overcome it. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear this message of hope and resilience. Together, we can rise above the hardest challenges and build a future worth fighting for.